Hi, it's Penny here, and today I wanted to go through some of the books that I rated 1 star and see if we can put them into some categories. So a few weeks ago I did a tier ranking of all my 5-star books. There were quite a lot of them, and it was very difficult for me to decide how I felt about them. However, I think 1-star books will be easier because I give out a lot less 1-star books. I think we've only got about 22 here to go through. So for my 1-star books, I've just got 4 categories. Firstly, we've got men, which I think is fairly self-explanatory. Then I've got What Is Happening. This is basically books where it's so badly written I could barely follow what was happening. Then we have Please Stop Talking. These are books where just they're really boring or they just go on for far too long. And then lastly is You've Ruined It. These are books which had a lot of potential, could have been really great, but there's like one particular thing about it that makes me go 1 star. So let's get into it. The first book that I have here is The Path of Daggers. This is, I think, the 8th book in the Wheel of Time. And this is the book where I kind of gave up on the series. So I have read technically the whole series, but from book 8, I read the plot summaries. And then I think just for the books, like the last 3, the ones with Brandon Sanderson, I think, I picked them up again and read them again. But I cheated through the middle of the series, which everyone calls the slog. I cheated and I just read the plot summaries. And maybe there are a few bits that I feel like I missed out on, but mostly I'm pretty happy that I decided to do that because it was just way too painful. So these I would put in Please Stop Talking because the series is just so dragged out. Like all of the books are very slow paced, but in that middle there's just very little happening. And like when I read the plot summaries, I think the plot summary for book 8 is like 2 paragraphs or maybe even only 1 paragraph. Whereas some of the other books have like paragraphs and paragraphs of stuff that actually happened. Whereas this book, it's like nothing happened. We just went blah, 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 blah for a whole book and it was incredibly boring and I couldn't do it. So in the middle, someone just needed to tell Robert Jordan to stop talking. Okay, then we have Singularity. This is a short story anthology by a New Zealand author. And I did read somewhere that the author was referred to as like a nepotism baby. So I think her parents were writers or something. I haven't really researched this, but it kind of did seem like that. Like in some ways, I guess you could say it was creative, but it felt like someone trying very hard to be creative. And I just didn't like the stories, and also a lot of the time I couldn't even really work out what she was trying to do with these stories, and if there was a message, I hated the message, and I just still am kind of confused about why this got published because I'm sure New Zealand authors can do better than this. Okay, then we have The First Binding. I read this recently. It could have, in the beginning, it could have been 5 stars. I really liked the initial beginning, even though I could see there were a lot of similarities to The Name of the Wind. But then the similarities continued to the point where things were happening that were so similar to The Name of the Wind. Like I've been wanting to reread The Name of the Wind, but I haven't wanted to because the 3rd book in the series hasn't come out. But I don't need to reread The Name of the Wind now because by reading The First Binding, I was reminded of everything that happens in The Name of the Wind because it pretty much all happens again very similarly in The First Binding. And I'm going to put this in You've Ruined It because it could have been really good. It did have a very slow pace and the writing definitely wasn't as good as The Name of the Wind, although very few things are. Like I have a lot of problems with Patrick Rothfuss and the Kingkiller Chronicles, especially in regards to that 3rd book, but you cannot deny that Patrick Rothfuss's writing is really beautiful. But The First Binding, the writing was really slow, but there was like a South Asian influence to the mythology of The First Binding that I think could have been really great, and a lot of the setup was amazing. I really loved the first chapter when I did it as part of my Try a Chapter project. Like it had so much potential, and then by completely ripping off The Name of the Wind's plot, he ruined it. So that's a shame. I feel like I'm trying to go through this quickly, but also for every single one of these books I want to rant about it a little bit. So next we have 1Q84. This one I will put into men. I read The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami and I really liked it, even though there was some fucked up menness to that. And then everything else I've read by Haruki Murakami, I've really struggled to overlook it. In 1Q84, we have this author who is now going to be taking the work of this teenage girl and like basically rewriting it but taking the credit for it or something. I can't really remember the details at this point, but the whole way that he acts when he meets this teenage girl is disgusting. And as well, the woman character is like obsessed with sex and murder in a way that just like I can't deal with Haruki Murakami and the way that he thinks about women. And I can't actually remember, did one Q84 have some weird period stuff? Because I think all his other books I've read did. Anyway, men, huh? Sometimes my favorite, but other times really not. Then we have Death and Resurrection, is this called? By R.A. McAvoy. So this I got in a box of books. So a long time ago, I actually supported Patrick Rothfuss's World. I can't remember the name now of his charity thing that he was doing. I supported it and I got a box of books, and most of them were not books that I wanted to read, so it was a little bit disappointing, but this is one I thought could be good, and I can't really remember it. It's something about a guy who has like these dreams. Maybe he can tell the future a little bit. Sounds like something I would like. But as well, the main character is like Native American, but the author is not, and I mean, I'm not American, so I don't really know, but it didn't seem like great representation to me. It seemed quite like it could be quite offensive. And I just also couldn't really tell what was happening. It seemed really badly written. So I'm going to put it in what is happening, but also like, what? Why would you write that? Okay, then we have Slam. Slam by Nick Hornby. This goes into men. This is a story about a teenage boy who, I can't remember if this is spoilers, but also I don't recommend this book. A teenage boy who gets this girl pregnant, I think, and then feels very bad about it. Like, oh, my life has been ruined. Is completely unhelpful, doesn't learn any lessons. Also weirdly keeps talking to his Tony Hawk poster, and just the whole thing never dealt with, like, it was an interesting story, had some interesting themes, didn't make any good points about them, didn't have a good lesson, like the main character didn't learn anything about responsibility, and I hated it. Do you know what I think I need though? I think I actually need another category, because I'm looking at the next book, which is called Never Get Angry Again, and I have no memory of reading this book. I'll just add this new category called I Have No Memory, because I have no memory of reading this book. But I gave it 1 star, so I think it probably made me quite angry. And definitely did not help me to never get angry again. Then we have the Pall Bearers Club, and I am conflicted about this. Part of me wants to put it into Please Stop Talking, because like nothing happened for most of this book. It was just this guy talking about his life and pretending like it was really impactful, and it wasn't. Like nothing was happening, and it's a story where this guy is telling about how he met this girl and kind of implying quite heavily that she's a vampire, and then the story actually has like her annotations of her like questioning the validity of what he's saying, and like the setup sounds really interesting, but actually everything about this guy's life that he's explaining is incredibly boring, but he's acting like it's some kind of super meaningful story, and I think that's intentional, but oh, it was so boring to read. And the annotations weren't really that interesting either. And like, why was he thinking she was a vampire? That wasn't even interesting either. So like, I also kind of want to put this in what is happening, not because I didn't know what was happening, but because nothing was happening. And I also kind of want to put this in men, because it really was that kind of thing where this guy thinks that he's being really deep and meaningful, and that he, you know, like the mediocrity of man, where these mediocre men think that what they're doing is amazing, and because they're men, somehow they do get attention, although maybe that's not entirely fair for this book. So I think maybe I'll just put it in Please Stop Talking. Like, it was so boring. I was so bored. And I know some people love that book, and I honestly don't get it. Then we have Giles. So this is a spin-off from the Buffy comics. So the Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show continued on after the TV show in comic book form, and then they did this Giles one where Giles is, I think, somehow ended up back being a teenager, and he has a relationship with this black woman, and I am either going to put this in You Ruined It, because it could have been cool, or probably more honestly, I should put it in I have no memory. Like, I know I read it, but I actually have no memory of why I didn't like it, or what happened, or anything like that. Okay, then this one is 100 Ways to Simplify Your Life by Joyce Meyer. This one I actually need a category maybe that is like deception, because that just seems like it's going to be some simple little book about things you can do, like little tips about things you can do to make your life easier. And it was all about God. It was like, you know what would make your life easier? God. Are you struggling with doing your dishes? Have you thought about God? I'm not religious, so that was really not what I was looking for with this book, and completely unhelpful. And I don't think anything about the book gave me the indication that that was going to be the contents. If it had, I would not have picked it up. So maybe it's just a marketing fail. I'll put it in You've Ruined It. Like, such a simple concept to write a book with 100 tips about how to make your life simpler. A lot of people could write that and make it good. But this was not it. Okay, then we have Along the Saltways Sea. So this was the second book in the Up and Under series by Sean Maguire, or the series is technically by A. Deborah Baker, but A. Deborah Baker is a character from the Middle Game series by Sean Maguire. And in the Middle Game series, there's A. Deborah Baker, who's this alchemist who wrote this series of children's books in order to get ideas into like general knowledge or general belief, so that then it would enable her to do certain alchemy. The concept, amazing. The first book was really good. I really enjoyed the first book. The second book, what was happening? Nothing. They were just mucking around all the time. Nothing that was... I mean, I guess I could follow it. I could follow the story, but nothing that was happening was important. It was so boring. It was nonsensical, but not in the way that I think it meant to be. Like, these books are like kind of fairy tale nonsensical stories. They go into this magical world where they have to follow the impossible road to get to the improbable road to get to the impossible city. Like, it's meant to be nonsensical, but also I think that this book should have been one book. Like, it's 4 books in the series. It should have been one book with 4 parts, and the parts are not, in my opinion, lined up how the books are. It's just filler. Most of the book is pointless filler. Okay, then we have Elysium, and this is classic What Is Happening. It's a bunch of short stories where the characters, a lot of them have the same names, but it's really unclear, like, are they the same people? It's always confusing. Like, you don't even know whether they're the same people or not. Sometimes I think the worlds are completely different, or the stories are kind of connected, but maybe they're not. I don't remember this one well because I honestly most of the time had no idea what was happening, so don't recommend it. Then we have, what is this one called? Playing to the Gods by Melanie Rawn. So this one, and there is another book I think here as well in this series. I'm going to put this on Please Stop Talking because they were just so long and boring and frustrating. It's kind of about this theatre group, and they use like some kind of illusion type magic as part of their theatre performances, and they're traveling around this magical land where there's some weird politics happening, but mostly it's about, like, as someone who's been in a band, it was very relatable. It's about like the conflict between different creative individuals trying to be a part of a creative group, but the group or the creativity happens to be this magical thing, and the world tends to be magical, but also there's just a lot of like interpersonal drama and family drama and blah blah blah, nothing happening for 200 pages. And I mostly read it because I'm still waiting for the final book, the 3rd book in Melanie Rawn's Saga of the Exiles. So it's been 20 years or something since the 2nd book in that trilogy was released, and because of probably valid reasons, Melanie Rawn has never got into that 3rd book. So when she published this series, I thought, well, at least it's some Melanie Rawn, but it was not what I wanted. And I really question that I pushed the whole way through that series. I think it's a 4-book series. I can't believe I read the whole thing, even though I hated most of my experience with it. Okay, then we have Upgrade by Blake Crouch. This I'm going to put in You Ruined It. To be honest, it wasn't that bad, but after reading Dark Matter and Recursion by Blake Crouch, that I loved both of those so much. After having read those, I had such high hopes for Upgrade, and it was not very good. And admittedly, I probably have forgotten now a lot of the reasons why I hated it, but I think the plot just didn't make a lot of sense, as well as the main character just not being likable. And it was kind of an interesting concept, so it's kind of frustrating. Not only did he ruin the execution of this concept, but he ruined it because the first 2 books of his that I read I really liked, so I thought he could have been a favorite author, but now I just don't know whether to be excited about anything else by him or not, because Upgrade was such a disappointment. Next, this is a weird one. I actually can't read the name because it's so tiny. Introduction to Disciplined Agile Delivery. This is a non-fiction book. When I was working, I was a Scrum Master working in like agile software development. And so I read this for work, and I disagreed with everything in the book, as well as it being very badly written and very badly structured. So, you know, part of me is tempted to put it in men, because this was almost definitely written by a man. Was it? I can't read, but almost definitely a man who thinks he knows better than everybody. You know, let's just put it there. Terrible. Then we have Tank Girl. So this is a graphic novel. I really loved the Tank Girl movie when I watched it when I was younger. Admittedly, it probably does have some bits that are kind of terrible, but some bits are really great. And so I was very excited to pick up the source material. And I kind of want to put this in no memory because I don't remember what I actually didn't like about it. But I also think maybe it belongs in what is happening, because I think it was one of those graphic novels where it is really hard to tell what's happening. Although, admittedly, I read this when I wasn't as experienced at reading graphic type things, so maybe if I read it again, I would appreciate it more. No, I think it trespassed me to at least know if it had any clarity or not, and I don't think it did, and I think it was just a bit silly. Although, then we have The Salt God's Daughter. This is one where I clearly remember reading it and not being able to follow what was happening. And so I can't tell you what it was about because I don't remember, because I don't think I ever really understood what was happening. Then we have How to Sleep Well. This is another one. I'm going to put it in I have no memory, but for a non-fiction book, I think that's always a clear sign that it didn't actually teach me anything. The title says what I was hoping to get from it, and clearly I didn't get that from it. Although I actually think this is another one where I could probably stick it in men, because it seemed like another man who thinks he knows everything but clearly does not. Why not leave it there? Okay, then we have Bastion by Mercedes Lackey. So this is, I can't remember, one of the books in the, I can't remember the name of the series either, but one of the later Valdemar series. I picked it up. I got really bored. I think I'll put it in Please Stop Talking, because I just was really bored. And I don't know if it's because there was a change in the way that Mercedes Lackey is writing the Valdemar books, or is it because my reading tastes have changed so much, and now if I went back to the earlier Valdemar books, which I really loved as like a teen and a young adult, like if I went back to those, would I hate those now? I'm a little bit concerned that I would, and I'm gonna reread them at some point. But yeah, I was just really bored. I felt like there wasn't enough happening, and a lot of it really did feel like filler to me. Okay, then we have A Christmas Wedding. So this one is actually the first book that I ever rated on Goodreads. A 1-star read. Decided to start using Goodreads at the start of the year, and my mum had given me this book, The Christmas Wedding, for Christmas, because it's a Christmas book, and it's about this old woman who decides she's going to get married. She's a widow, I think, but she decided she's going to get remarried to one of these 3 men that she's friends with. I think they were friends with her husband as well. She decides she's going to get remarried. It starts planning the wedding, but tells the 3 men that are the possible husbands that she hasn't decided which one of them she's going to marry, or she has decided but she's not going to tell them until the wedding day. What the fuck? And it also had like this weird like multimedia thing where she's like filming videos, and it's giving a description of the video she's filming, and honestly, what the fuck was that? When I think back to it, I'm going to put it in What Is Happening, but I'm actually tempted to put it in Men, because it is James Patterson, and why is he being published when that's the kind of drivel that he's writing? Actually, maybe I'll leave it in Men. That was the worst way to start Goodreads ever. Lastly, we have Passenger by Alexander Bracken, and this is one where, to be honest, if I rated it now, I would probably give it 2 or 3 stars because it just wasn't for me. I usually really like time travel stories, of which this was one, but it was kind of like a romantasy type thing, and it just was too angsty and too... And of course my battery died. Anyway, Passenger, I'll put it in. You ruined it. Like, it had potential. I can see that other people would like it, but for me, it was ruined for me because it just focused on this nonsense that didn't make any sense to me. And that's not what I want from a time travel story. I want the complexity of time travel. I want the twistiness, you know, and this was more about the romance and the angst, and she just happened to be jumping around time while we were doing that. Anyway, so that's my ranking. I guess the ones at the top are the worst. The ones down to You Ruined It are maybe the best. I have no memory. Who knows? Wouldn't recommend them anyway. I'm actually surprised how many I put in men, but maybe I used that as a reason more than I should have. Definitely these ones in What Is Happening, I don't recommend them because they're just really badly written, I would say. Please Stop Talking. Those ones I could see other people liking if you have different preferences to me, and probably the same with You Ruined It. Especially, I've seen a lot of people loving The First Binding, people who haven't read The Name of the Wind and don't realize how much of a ripoff it is. Or actually, also, I think people who've forgotten a lot about The Name of the Wind and don't, again, even though they've read it before, don't realize just how far it's going with like copying the plot. Anyway, let me know if you have read any of these books that I rated 1 star. I would love to chat with you about them down in the comments. Let me know if they happen to be books that you really loved. Also, I'd really love to know, like, what do you think is the #1 reason that you give a book 1 star? Let's chat about that as well. Do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.